And China's biggest political gathering of the year, also known as the Two Sessions, has concluded with a message of unity and control. The week-long event was filled with high-level meetings that have been dominated by the economy, which last year posted some of the slowest growth in years. Over the weekend, ministers also pledged to do more to boost employment and stabilise a troubled property market. And while we're joined by CNA's Olivia Siong and Deborah Wong reporting live from Beijing, how did this year's political meetings compare with what has happened in previous years?
Well, the road closures here in Beijing have been lifted. Things are going back to normal following this week-long meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. The cars are going on, traffic conditions are back to normal at the moment.
That's right. We have seen 8 days of meetings going on that we and the team have covered here. But today, on the last day of these the National People's Congress meetings, there were still items left on the agenda, and we saw the largely ceremonial parliament pass several items, including that all-important government work report, which sets out economic policy for China in the year ahead.
Well, one of the other key items on the agenda that we saw being passed today really was the amendments to the State Council's organic law. We saw an overwhelming majority of about 99.4% vote in favor of it. Now, no surprises there, given that China's delegates are in line with the party. Now, under the revised law, the State Council now is required to uphold the leadership of the party, safeguard this authority, as well as to abide by the Constitution when performing their duties. Now, this is important because, since the law was enacted in 1982, the same year that China's Constitution was formed, it has never been revised until now. And observers are saying that the changes really reflect how powers are shifting from the State Council to be under more of the party's control, and that is in line also with how, well, that's in line with trends that we've seen the last few years, and how Chinese President Xi Jinping has taken on consolidating more power and is serving his third term as the president this year. Ollie?
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of the diminishing role, perhaps, of the State Council, we saw that manifesting in one of the surprises this year at the Two Sessions, even though these events usually go according quite as expected as planned. But this year, normally on this day at the close of the sessions, we would be bringing you the key takeaways from the Chinese Premier's news conference. But this year, we aren't doing that. And that's because at the beginning, prior to the opening of the NPC's meetings, we had heard from the government spokesperson saying that it was scrapping the Chinese Premier's news conference this year and for the rest of this term in government, breaking from a 30-year-old tradition. Now, speaking to other journalists, we all find it a bit unusual that there is this hole in our calendar this year. And even though these news conferences are, well planned, but they are a rare opportunity for the media to directly pose questions to China's number 2 ranking official. And these news conferences, as we have attended in the past, have typically been very wide-ranging. The Premier would talk about economic policy, China's relations with other countries as well, and even in some unscripted moments, give us insight into their leadership style and even the inner workings of China's upper echelons of its leadership. But that is missing, as we have seen in Chinese President Xi Jinping's term, and since he's come to power, that he's not been afraid to change norms and traditions. And now we are seeing this, as observers have put it, this diminishing role of the State Council in moving policy ahead for the country.
We may not have heard from China's Premier today, but the leadership, the ministers across the last week have conceded that China is facing challenges domestically and abroad. Did they unveil any packages, moves that they will use to counter these challenges?
Well, absolutely. You know, the GDP growth target of about 5%, analysts are saying that it is ambitious. It does still signal that the government wants to keep the economy a priority. But, you know, analysts are saying that it is ambitious because the property crisis that China is experiencing at the moment is still a drag on the economy. On that front, the housing minister did say that there will be more policies to make housing more affordable, but they haven't scanned details on it. Analysts have also added that, the fact that there is hardly any policies offered to stabilise the market, stabilise the property market, is a matter of disappointment as well. But we did see an emphasis on new catchphrases like new productive forces. So we can see that there is a priority on policies to do with AI, innovation. In fact, we see that happening in a 10% increase of R&D spending as well. So a lot of emphasis on new technologies, and that really is aligned with the whole government strategy of being more self-reliant, especially as it deals with geopolitical issues like trade export restrictions from Europe as well as the US. Ollie.
That's right. On the foreign policy front, we're talking about China being more self-reliant, but we did see the China-US relationship once again in key focus. One of the key moments during this week-long meetings was on the sidelines of the event. We saw China's top diplomat Wang Yi front his 10th news conference as the foreign minister. We know he was reappointed last year following the abrupt removal of the former foreign minister. And in his news conference, he did acknowledge that there have been improvements to the China-US relationship in recent times, but he also did say that the US still held misperceptions of China. And he also said that, referring to a growing list of sanctions he said had reached, quote, bewildering levels of unfathomable absurdity. Now, observers are saying that there is this detente between China and the US, but if economic restrictions, which have angered Beijing, are not resolved, then this could possibly lead to an end of this warming ties that we are seeing between these two superpowers.
So there are macro policies, but at the same time, it is interesting to see how these macro policies play out on the ground level. I attended a couple of provincial meetings during the two sessions, and one of them was the Guangdong Provincial meeting. And, overall delegates are supportive of the policies, even though they are going to be under pressure to deliver on those growth targets. Now, for Guangdong, for instance, it is known as China's manufacturing as well as economic powerhouse, but it has also experienced a couple of setbacks in the last few years, with local as well as foreign manufacturers diversifying their supply chain out of China into economies like South Asia as well as Southeast Asia. So one way that Guangdong wants to bring all these back, foreign trade investment back, is really to go on a whole trend of high quality development. We're looking at high-end manufacturing, a focus on smart as well as green industries, as well as building the connectivity within the Greater Bay Area to tap on foreign trade investments. Let's hear more from some delegates.
关注的是明年的经济社会发展是稳中有进。
那你觉得明年的经济乐观吗？
我很有信心。
总结工作实事求是，这个部署工作实事求是，而且呢具体明确，对鼓足干劲儿、提振信心，那起的作用是非常大的。
So the two sessions may be over, but we are still looking out for key events. For instance, the Chinese Communist Party's third plenum that has not been held. It was supposed to be held last year, and that is an important session because it is when the party charts its major economic policies, its direction. So observers are saying that the fact it has been delayed also signifies that it is a high-stakes session because authorities may need a little bit more time to deliberate on key policies, especially amid the very weak economic outlook.
That's right. Another thing we'll be looking out for are personnel changes. We had seen some observers, predict that perhaps we would hear more, perhaps a new foreign minister being appointed at these meetings, perhaps people would be filling the 2 vacated seats of state councillors following the removal of China's former foreign minister and defense minister. But we saw that that was not on the agenda, and we will be looking out for when the next opportunity for these positions to be filled will arise. It's very windy today, perhaps a metaphor for the winds of change that are blowing here in Beijing. Back to you.
Thanks. CNA's Olivia Siong and Deborah Wong reporting live to us there from Beijing.